Good morning, everyone. I am Beth White, President and CEO of ICESA. I use she, her pronouns. Glad to be with you this morning. I have the opportunity to do some year-end discussion and also plenty of time for questions. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on, at least in our world at ICESA during 2025, talk a little bit about what's coming for next year, and then the legislative session is I would say it's coming, although it sort of started, but then it sort of ended, and then it's going to start again in January. So I'm going to unpack the legislative adventure that we've been on the last couple of weeks for all of you. All right, so a year in review. Looking back over 2025 at ICESA, we have had two new staff members. You have heard from one of them already, which was August Maples. Very excited to have August on board as our training and events manager. Jasmine Davis started very, very early in the year. I think January. Is that right, Jasmine? Give me a nod. There we go. Jasmine is our sexual assault response program coordinator, works closely with Kelly Gartland on our sexual assault programs, including the SART environment. So that's Jasmine's area. We had a name change. This occurred actually back in January, so it's been almost a year. We lost our human trafficking coordination funding from the federal government, and so we went back to ICESA, where we had been originally. We were ICESA HT for a time, but now we are back to being just ICESA. There is no interruption in our sexual assault response services, and certainly anyone who is experiencing sexual assault as part of a human trafficking situation will be able to get services not only from us, but from our service providers as well. So the name change really is mostly administrative and doesn't reflect really too much of a change in our day-to-day. We also have a new website, and I hope everyone within the sound of my voice has had an opportunity to take a look at it. It has additional functionality, including finding and being able to view previous trainings a lot easier than before. So I want to thank Michael in particular for all of his hard work on our new website. We are really happy at the way it turned out. And Jasmine, because she is so on top of things, put the new website address and link into the chat. So if anybody would like to check that out right now, instead of listen to me or both at the same time, because we all know how to multitask, I encourage you to do that. So more about the year in review. This was a tough year, right? So let's all just take a moment and reflect on what it was like back in March and April in this environment. We know, because we went through it ourselves, that it was a very difficult time of uncertainty. All of the federal government was experiencing a lot of instability and uncertainty, and that absolutely did impact us as well. So back in March and April, we really didn't know what the environment was going to look like going forward. And so just as a reminder, even though it might not be the best thing to go back to those days, we experienced a lot of uncertainty. Health and Human Services in particular was very dramatically impacted. And I think most of you know, if you pay attention at all, that they have laid off lots of staff, and entire divisions of Health and Human Services have been completely gutted or dramatically reduced. The Department of Education also experienced these layoffs. And the reason this is important in our world is because it does impact our higher ed partners who are working in the space of doing Title IX work in our colleges and universities. So even though the Department of Education might not seem like it's something that has some impact on our work, if anybody listening to me is a Title IX coordinator or does sexual assault response or prevention work on a college or university campus, you know what I'm talking about. And so that has been a very difficult road to navigate. We've had lots of changes through both executive orders and other kinds of policies at the state and the federal level about allowable activities. I don't have to remind you, but I will remind us that we saw a dramatic change in our related work. Diversity, equity, and inclusion apparently is something that the new federal administration is not interested in supporting. So we had a lot of changes in that respect. And of course, that it became very complicated very fast to figure out how to do our work within the confines of the federal legislation that we all know about, which is, of course, the Violence Against Women Act and other federal legislation, which does contemplate those kinds of focuses with the new executive orders that changed those dramatically. So you may know that there have been a series of lawsuits. ICESA did not sign on to the lawsuits, but they were national lawsuits that were filed by our sister coalitions around the country, including the National Alliance to End Sexual Violence, which is our umbrella organization at the federal level. That environment is still changing, and we have tried to help figure out how to navigate all of that, but it was and continues to be a challenging time. We thought, like lots of people thought, that the RPE money, which is rape prevention education, which comes out of HHS, was going to be cut completely, and therefore that we would potentially have to discontinue our prevention efforts. And that was very scary, very fast in the late May, June timeframe. The good news is that even though it seems like everyone at HHS in the Office of Injury Prevention has either been laid off or has been reassigned, those grant funds are continuing to flow. So I see Whitney, and I think Sharon is probably on the call as well. And I just want to say out loud, Whitney and Sharon, we're glad you're still around, because we really were a little worried for a minute about whether we were going to be able to pay you. And I hated that for all kinds of reasons, not the least of which is going to make me so sad that you would not be with us anymore, but you're still here, and I'm really grateful. And that is because we are continuing to receive the RPE funds that are coming from the federal government. So many of you, I think, on this call probably are in a similar situation where RPE or some version of prevention funding is coming to you, and it was unclear kind of what the landscape was going to look like. So it was a difficult year, and I'm just going to take a minute and let us all reflect on getting through. I think it's fair to say that we don't yet know what might be coming down the pike, but we have lived to fight another day, and fight we do on behalf of victims and survivors all around Indiana. So thank you. Thank you to all of you for navigating those waters with courage. Thank you for continuing to get up every day and do this work in a very challenging time. Let's hope in a year from now, when we are reliving our year in review of 2026, that we do not have a similar story to tell. But even if we do, we'll persevere, because we won't allow all of this to derail us. All right, so let's talk about the legislature, which is the area of work at our office that is solely mine. Although my strong and smart program staff are often collaborating and conferring with me on issues of legislation, just because I'm not the subject matter expert on any of this, but I am the one who goes over there and fights for us. And last year, the 2025 legislative session was a very interesting one. It was a budget session, which meant that the most acute and important thing that the legislature was working on is figuring out the biennium budget, which is a 2-year budget starting on July 1st. So just a reminder to make our lives complicated. The state budget is July 1 to June 30. The federal fiscal budget is September 30 to October 1 to September 30. Most of us live in a calendar year budget, which of course is January 1st to December 31st for purposes of our audits and our 990s that we file with the IRS and all the other things that we're doing financially. So we live in a world where we have 3 different financial years, and it's an adventure. So the state budget starts on July 1st, and in 2025, they were involved in a budget session to attempt to put together a state budget for 2 years. It starts July 1st, 2025, and goes through June 30, 2027. So there's a lot to say about what they did with the budget this year, but I won't launch into that discussion except to say that there was some good news for us. I'm going to go to number 2 on my legislative wins, which was that the Sexual Assault Victim Assistance Fund, which is the only state appropriation that we receive. If any of you are dual programs, there's also DVPT, which is a domestic violence program. Probably some of you listening know better than I do, but the DVPT is the domestic violence version of SAVAF. They are the 2 state appropriations in this world that we have. And the good news is we went into the session, let me take a step back. We went into the session thinking that we might be able to plug what we know to be the hole that is coming. And I'm talking more about this in a minute. And I put together a coalition, and we worked hard in that group to make the case to legislators that we needed to increase SAVAF for purposes of helping stave off the cuts we're going to see in VOCA. Okay. And we spent over a year and a half working on that. And then we got into the budget session, and it became very clear very fast that if we held on to what we had in SAVAF, that would be considered a victory, because they were slashing everywhere that they could, including, by the way, as I'm sure you have heard, Medicaid funding has been dramatically slashed. Child care vouchers have been dramatically slashed. The kind of the general environment in state government, including all state agencies, took a 3% cut. That's the Department of Corrections, that's Family and Social Services, that's Department of Transportation. Various other agencies took a 3% cut. So instead of asking for more, which I think it became really clear right away we weren't going to get, I was really concerned about whether we would hold on to what we had in SAVF. And for reasons I can't explain, but I don't want to ask too many questions, SAVF didn't experience a cut. So we are still level funded, which is $4 million a year and $8 million over the biennium. And I am very, very grateful to our legislative partners, specific legislators, including Julie Altoff from the Northwest area and a great friend of Fairhaven, our sexual assault program up there. Other members of the legislature who quietly made sure we didn't experience a cut. Very, very grateful. And we didn't. We held on to SAVF at $8 million over the biennium. So that is great news. We made limited progress in a statute of limitations effort for rape as a category 3. And we had hoped to eliminate the statute of limitations for rape and child molesting as a 3, which is a non-aggravated rape, if I could use that term. We didn't accomplish that, but we did get a small expansion in newly discovered evidence. So that was, we're going to take it. It's a very modest win, but we'll take it. In addition, there was a new piece of legislation about human trafficking awareness. Posting and information at rest areas, gas stations, and welcome centers did pass. And this picture that you see is Representative Bartlett in the brown jacket and me and some others with the governor signing that particular piece of legislation. So we were gratified to see that pass. I spent some time engaging with the gas station convenience store operators so that they knew what the new requirement was and that we could have information out about human trafficking. I travel a lot, and in other states, in gas stations and rest stops and truck stops, you'll see lots of signage about human trafficking awareness. And Indiana didn't have that until now they do. And that went into effect July 1st. So we are pleased with those wins that we experienced. We did not make any progress on rape kits. The statute of limitations, which is what SOL means, was modest, and we didn't make any progress at all on victims comp. And I held out hope that we would make some progress on victims comp because it is federal money and it didn't impact the state budget at all. But and by progress, I mean expanding the cap per incident per victim for victims for the comp amounts. So Indiana has the lowest amount in the states or the victim comp program. And I had hoped we could at least get closer to the middle, but we didn't. And I don't know what we're going to do about that, but we'll see going forward. Are there questions about any of this? So some more things that we will look back on 25 and consider success. I hope you will agree. We had 8 events around the state during Sexual Assault Awareness Month, which of course was April. We would like to be out and about more, and Kelly's going to give me the evil eye when I say this because Kelly and Justin and I we were on the road relentlessly, but we're going to do it because April is a big month and we love it. And it's a great time to be out and about. So if you are working on your Sexual Assault Awareness Month events for April, whether they are marches or tabling or displays or various things, we've had the opportunity to participate in all kinds of different ways that you, our partners around the state, mark April. We would love to participate. So the sooner the better in knowing when those are happening so we can get them on the calendar so we can plan to be there and participate with you in those important events. We also had various in-person networking events with our RCC leadership. And then we had our leadership event in Indianapolis in April. And this picture over to the right is me standing in front of a screen doing something, talking with all of you. We had it at an event venue downtown, and we're working on where it's going to be next year, this coming year, 26. So we have worked hard, and by we, I mean Kelly, but I always take credit for Kelly's hard work, to have our leadership engagement opportunities to be a mix of online, in-person, regional, and then statewide. So what we did in 26, I think, was a combination of all those things. We did a January remote. So, January is not a great time to be on the road. We did the April in-person with everyone. We did regional meetings in the fall. We just concluded those in early November. And we try really hard to find places where we can have it be convenient as possible to as many of you as possible. And we had really good attendance. So I hope we got that balance right this time. So speaking of being out and about, we didn't cut any ribbons this year, which is okay. We still have our glittery scissors. They are ready to go. And it looks like maybe we'll have a couple of ribbon cuttings coming up in in the spring. But nobody closed either, which I think, considering a couple slides ago, was really, really a great victory. We started the first licensed clinical social work clinical supervision program. That does not roll right off the tongue. But I think most of you heard us talk about this already. Kelly is a licensed clinical social worker, and as her journey toward that certification required clinical supervision hours with a person who held the clinical license. And one thing that we know in Indiana is that we do not have sufficient numbers of clinicians in every parts of the state who can provide trauma-informed therapy for survivors. And in order to do something about that, we decided what we would do is enter into a contract with a licensed clinical social worker who could provide that supervision at no charge to the program and to the individual going through the licensure. And Kelly is the knower about all the things that you have to have in order to be prepared for that step in licensure. And the goal of this, as I said, is just to make sure that we can expand the pool of people with this licensure who are trauma informed and prepared to work with our survivors. All right. So some more year in review. We launched and are going to be continuing actually the Law Enforcement Victim Service Provider Collaboration Project. It is federally funded, and it's an opportunity for us to both train and engage with law enforcement and victim services. We know that those relationships are hard. We do. We really do. And we want to help. Some of our providers around the state have excellent relationships with law enforcement, just excellent. And it makes an enormous difference in the way our survivors can be served. We also know that there are some law enforcement agencies around the state for whom there is room for improvement in those relationship building opportunities. And so we are working on the opportunity to help you engage in that, and also have done some series of trainings. We relaunched our Speak Up, Speak Out prevention program, which is SUSOP. And this is Whitney and Sharon. This is Sharon's baby in particular. It is a wonderful training that I really believe in and feel strongly about, aimed at men and boys and how they can become allies in the anti-violence movement. We've deployed it mostly in the higher ed space, although we've talked some about kind of changing it a little bit to make it potentially appropriate for the high school space. But now it is really focused at the higher ed space. And we are excited about the opportunity to present it in colleges and fraternities and sports teams, various other venues where young men gather, and where toxic masculinity is a thing that we should talk about and make young men aware of so that they can become out. So here is some training information by the numbers, and I'm not going to read them to you, but we have kept up the Coffee with the Coalitions at least once a month, and we've had fun with them. I hope you felt like they were a good use of time. We've had a number of other training events, lots of hours. Of course, Core 40 being our bread and butter of our training curriculum, but wanting to make sure that we also provide updated training for everyone who isn't necessarily a beginner, but also your intermediate and even advanced sort of training opportunities. We did some live training, and that's, I think, great. Also challenging for those of you who are not close to Indianapolis. But on average, each participant spent about 6 hours in our training. So we're really gratified by that. And we are always open to new trainers, new topics, new opportunities. If you're at a conference or somewhere and you hear someone that you just think is really excellent, let us know. We would be delighted to build the bench and expand our training opportunities with people that you recommend or with things that you really want. And we've got some merch, which we're pretty excited about too. Probably getting close to possible for everyone on your Christmas list to buy them a t-shirt that says, "I believe you," and "Consent is sexy." We have a bunch of stickers that say "Consent is sexy." They're very popular, very popular. We were at the Prosecuting Attorneys Council conference last week, Kelly and Jasmine and I, and we had a table specifically to talk about SARTs. But I'll tell you, "Consent is sexy." Those stickers they fly right off the table. Even our prosecutors who have teenagers in their lives wanted those "Consent is sexy" stickers. So that's why we print them. They can have them. So if you want some t-shirts, go to our website and we'll be happy to sell them to you. So what's coming up in 2026? I've already alluded to it, but let's go right to the VOCA cuts. I think it was last week that our partners at ICJI issued a memo over email that said what they know at this point, which is we believe it's going to be a 40% cut in VOCA. The VOCA story is a long and winding one. For those of you who don't know, and I think that's probably not very many of you, but VOCA, the Victim of Crime Act, is a pot of money at the federal level administered by the Department of Justice, which is funded solely by white-collar crime settlements. So this is a bad way to fund essential government services. The VOCA funding is not exclusive to sexual assault and domestic violence. It's victims of all crime. The money is used for the victim comp pot of money that every state gets to help victims navigate the costs of victimization. It is used for sexual assault kits that are, collected in the by our SANE nurses in the hospitals. It is used in a variety of ways. ICGI put together a spreadsheet that I have looked at repeatedly about who gets VOCA money in Indiana. Our legal service providers get it. All of us, all of our programs, domestic violence, sexual assault, Mothers Against Drunk Driving get VOCA money, right? That is not sexual assault, but it is victimization. The programs like that get VOCA money. Lots and lots of programs all around the state of Indiana get VOCA money. And the up and down of the white collar crime settlement pot over the course of the last 5 to 7 years has just been dramatic. And there are lots of reasons why that's true, but it's not as important to know why as it is to say, what are the realities? And the reality is, we're going to experience a 40% cut. Now, our partners at the federal level, the National Alliance to End Sexual Violence, and then the National Network to End Domestic Violence, which is our domestic violence partner at the federal level as well, have been working for some years to change the funding formula of the VOCA pot. And there were all kinds of efforts, including some other kinds of settlements, the Department of Justice, some direct appropriation from the federal government, other sources, and they haven't had very much luck. There hasn't been a lot of progress. So the VOCA pot is at the current fund balances are at a historic low, and that is why this 40% cut is coming. It is going to be a shock to the system, and it's also going to be difficult for all of us to put our grant requests together, but also for ICJI to figure out how to navigate dealing with the cut. So there is going to be more to be said and to be discussed about all of this coming down the pike. And we have a call scheduled, I think, in January with RCC leadership in particular to talk more about all of this and what it's going to mean. And we'll be letting you know about the date and time for that here in the next, probably the very first week of January, I think, is when we will know for sure. It's going to be hard. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it or whatever. It's going to be hard. We receive VOCA, just like almost everybody within the sound of my voice right now. And we want you to know that we're working as closely as we can with ICGI to try to know what's coming and to make sure you know what's coming, and then to prepare for what it's going to mean for the next round. Are there questions or comments about that? Okay. Well, potentially related then, we're going to really, I don't know, get serious. And I'm not saying that to be critical of anyone, but we know we need to do some data gathering. And it's really hard in this space. It's hard because different grants require different kinds of data, and it's apples and oranges. And then when people, legislators in particular, ask me, what's the data showing? How much are we increasing? Are assaults increasing? Are people seeking services? Is that increasing or decreasing? I don't really have a great answer. So we really want to be able to have a good answer. And so we're going to do some data gathering. We do not want to give you more work to do. We do not want to add yet another thing that you have to do every month for us. I'm the last person in the world who should talk about how it works to gather data, because numbers are not my thing. Math is hard. I can't do it. So Michael and Kelly and others who are much smarter about all this are going to be interacting with you to talk about what this is going to look like. I just want you to know this is coming down the pipe. And it is absolutely 100% an effort to make sure we can go to the legislature in the 2027 budget session and ask for more Sabbath. That is what this is about. We need to be able to tell the story with some credibility. And the story is, with fewer resources, we are serving more people, and the need is great. And when the need is great and fewer resources exist, then we're not serving everybody the way we want to. And so that is the story we know is true, but I've got to have the data to back it up so that I can convince our legislators to give us some more money. So that's what I'm doing with the data gathering, and that's what is going to be coming down the pike here in the next year. All right, moving right along. What else is coming up? I already mentioned the Law Enforcement and Victim Services Collaboration Project. It continues, and what it's going to look like coming up in the year of 26 is some one-on-one opportunities with Dottie Davis, who is our new spiritual guide. Dottie Davis we love Dottie so much. She is a retired law enforcement officer. She's a survivor of domestic violence. She is a rock star trainer. She is a person of a really, really deep capacity to understand all of these issues, and it just really speaks with tremendous credibility with our law enforcement partners and also with us and our service providers as well. So Dottie is available. We got some money, grant money, to deploy her to build relationships around the state in areas where that's helpful and useful. So if you are in a place or know of some place that could use that kind of deep intervention, let us know and we'll get you involved. Yes. We expect to cut at least one ribbon, and I'm not going to give that away, but we think we will have at least one provider who's ready to become an RCC with all of the necessary services required by the Department of Justice. So that's exciting. We will have our April networking leadership event someplace, and we don't know where yet, but we're working on it. So we will letting you know that. So we know gathering together is important. We also know that if you're far from Indianapolis, it can be a challenge to get here. But we really want to try to make that event something that's worth your travel and your energy. So that's coming down the pike as well. What else? Well, we are going to continue doing all of our training, continue to lean all the way into our obligation to be a resource for all of you. TA, response, all the things, whatever you need, you need to let us know because we're here to help. We're having a baby. And I say we because I'm not the one who is up at night and whose ankles are swollen, but Jasmine is, and she's having a baby, and we could not be more excited. And so Jasmine, does anybody have any questions or comments about anything that is coming in 2026? All right. Caitlin's got her hand raised. All right, Caitlin, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, no, I was just wondering if y'all are going to be doing anything with that new legislation regarding human trafficking awareness signage. Is that going to be something that's in 2026 plans for ICESA?
Yeah. So yes, although frankly, the good news is our partners at the Food and Fuel Association lobbying organization, which is actually embedded within the law firm, which is Krieg DeVault, which we also employ to be our lobbyists, are working with their members to get all that, to get implementation figured out. So I spoke on a panel back in October. I have answered a couple of technical related questions for those, but we're working with their lobbying organization to get compliance. Now, so much like everything else the legislature does, this is a requirement, but there's no carrot or stick, right? It just says you have to do it. If you don't do it, there isn't any violation or any fines or anything like that. But I think after the session is over, I'm going to work with the lobbyist for the Food and Fuel Association on some, compliance related spot checking, maybe. I mean, maybe Kelly and I'll get on the road and drive around to some of our gas stations and truck stops around Indiana to see if we've got compliance. But yes, that's the extent of our involvement really with compliance with the legislature, with the legislative initiative. Caitlin, does that answer your question?
A little bit. So you're more like looking to see if that's being implemented rather than creating signage for people to put up?
That is correct. The Food and Fuel Association is using the signage that is coming from a national group whose name right now I cannot come up with. There is signage that is created already, and it directs people to the national hotline phone number. So the signage has already been created, and they're going to deploy that. So
thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So the good news is we don't really have too much work to do except encouraging compliance. So that's one thing I have been spending some time doing. Thank you for that question. Other questions? All right. So the legislature. So they were in, and now they're out, and they're going to be in again starting in January, on January 5th. If you have been on the moon for the last 3 weeks, you don't know that they engaged in a redistricting fight that ended mid last week with a vote in the state Senate that they would not change the congressional maps. So upon that happening, even though they were working on other things during this time that they had convened, they adjourned. And so they're no longer meeting, and they will meet again starting on January 5th. So there are couple of things that we will be hoping to get accomplished, although as everything in the legislature, I try to have very low expectations. We hope to make some progress on rape kits. We need an inventory of the rape kit environment in Indiana. The last inventory that was taken was in 2017. It was voluntary, and we have not had one since, and we really need an inventory. We get pushback on an inventory from our partners in law enforcement for lots of reasons, and the legislature has not had an appetite to mandate an inventory. I've been working with Doug, our new ICJI head. He's been there, 8 months, so I guess he's still new, but Doug is very interested in trying to do an inventory that's not legislatively mandated. And I appreciate that because I think that might potentially get better compliance than if the legislature had to mandate it. But I don't know what that's going to look like. So Doug and I are continuing to talk and work through the logistics of that. There is already a bill that's been filed, and I looked at the legislative filings late last week. It's 1093, which is Representative Cash, and she has filed a bill for a mandatory inventory. Also, the mandatory testing of every kit, which is as far as I know, a complete non-starter with our state lab because they don't have the resources or the capacity, and some other things that are in the bill. So I don't know whether the bill is going to get any sort of movement this year or not. But we're going to pay very close attention to what's going on with rape kits. We're also going to just play defense like we always do. There generally are bills that are filed that we aren't necessarily in favor of. And so we'll be paying attention to that. This year is a short session. It is a non-budget session. They must adjourn by the end of February. That is a really short time frame. And because that's true, the leadership of the legislature gave each member a really strict limit of how many bills they can file. I think members of the Senate could file 3 and members of the House could file 4, which is not very many at all. And so as of last week, there were not very many bills filed. Now, the deadline is not until the 9th of January. So it's still possible that there are more bills that are percolating and that will end up getting filed. But I think it's going to be a very lean session for purposes of a lot of things, not the least of which the things that we will care about. There were 3 bills that I put on my list to watch. One involves consent for public exams, which is an interesting issue. One adds the word grooming to our statutory language and changes some statutory language around grooming in particular for young people who could be victimized. And then there's one that bans serious sex offenders from being in parks. Now, I think that's already in statute, but I don't know. I didn't look too closely at it, but I just made a note of it that it's something that I'll keep an eye on. And so far, that's it. That and the rape kit bill are really the 4 bills at this point that really involve our work. And that's not very many, obviously. Now, as I said, bills can still be filed until the 9th of January. Does anybody have questions about all of that? Okay. Well, as the session goes on, it'll start, as I said, on the 5th, and the deadline to get out of the House of Origin for bills is like the 3rd week of January. So it's a really fast track, and the committees will convene right away, and I'll be watching the committee agendas to see what is going to get a hearing and what isn't. But as it goes along, if anyone sees a bill that they're interested in or that you really think needs to go on my radar, please let me know, because I try really hard to pay attention. We have a really good lobbyist who gives me a report every week, but sometimes I miss things, and I want to make sure that I am paying as close attention as I can to everything that's happening. So if you want to know more about the legislative process, then you can find out who are your elected officials with this website right here. And then there's the IGA stands for Indiana General Assembly. So it's iga.in.gov. I have to say, as much as I find challenging working in the legislative environment, they have a really good website. And the website will let you search by legislator and the bills they filed. It'll let you search by keywords. So I put in sex and sexual assault and rape and just put the words in and up come the bills. It'll give you calendars every day about which committees are meeting and what they're hearing. And then you can click right to the bill so you can read it and all the things. It's really a very useful website. There are pictures of the legislators. There's a map of their districts under each of their names so that you can see, where you might fall. Now, the WAEO is a geospatial website, which means that you put in your address, that either your home address or the address of your facility or whatever, and it'll show you who represents that particular address. So the IGA website is more nuts and bolts about legislators and bills and their districts and those sorts of things. So both of those are a really important resource if you're doing research about this process. Or you can just ask me. That's probably the easiest thing to do, is send me an email and just ask me. But if you're interested, those are the 2 tools to use. Some of the county websites are really good and can tell you who's your prosecutor, who are your commissioners, all the things. And then some of them really aren't very good. So can be a challenge to find out who your county and local officials are. All right. Is that enough about the legislature? I think it is. That's probably more than enough. I plan to do my legislative report like I did last year, and I plan to send it out probably every couple of weeks. It'll list the bills I'm watching, it'll list what's happening with those bills, and it'll just kind of tell you what's happening as we go along. So you can look forward to that. So what do you want to know? What questions do you have? Caitlin, please.
Hi again. You had mentioned this earlier on in the year of like all of the different lawsuits that like our national leaders were able to sign on to. I was just wondering why ICESA wasn't able to join that.
Yeah. So good question. So our partners at the national level, NAESV, keep us very informed about the environment relating to lawsuits. And we internally, and by we worked a little bit with Laura Berry and our partners at ICADV, the Domestic Violence Coalition as well, to talk about what are the risks to signing on to those lawsuits and what are the benefits. And we really came to the calculation that signing on in a state where our governor is very closely aligned with the president and his administration, where our legislature is aligned with the president and his administration, although the redistricting vote last week might change that calculus a little bit, but hindsight is 2020. We didn't know that at the time. That we were worried about putting a target on our back. That's the true story. That's just about as easy as I can say it. And what we also knew was that the states that we're signing on, New York, Maine, California, New Hampshire, really very progressive states, were going to have as impactful litigation posture as could possibly have. In other words, there were good lawyers working with really smart partners to put together a strong litigation posture. And our name on the lawsuit would have had minimal impact compared to what I saw as the risk. Is that responsive to your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Working for the state, I definitely understand. So
no, I get it.
that.
I get it. I've been a lawyer a long time, and I was signing on would not have meant that I had any involvement in the litigation strategy, which is good because it would have been malpractice all over the place. I am not a federal litigator, but I just really felt strongly that we should be cautious. And so we were. And some of the lawsuits have been successful, frankly. We got an injunction to stop specifically the lawsuit that talked about the conflict between the Violence Against Women Act and the executive orders, how to navigate that conflict in the context of doing our work. We did get an injunction in that lawsuit that said that we had to comply with the federal legislation, which is what we all knew to be true. So that was really helpful. Now, that's not a final decision, and those lawsuits are continuing to percolate, but it's been a challenge. It's been a real challenge. Any other questions? Well, the final thing I'm going to say is thank you. Thank you for all of you and the hard work that you do. Thank you for navigating really, really hard times and focusing every single day on helping survivors and not getting distracted by all of the nonsense going on all around us. Just thank you. Thank you for everything. And we are here. We will continue to be here, and we want to be as helpful as we possibly can. So whatever you need, and if what you need is just to talk to somebody because you're frustrated or sad or whatever it is, then just please reach out and let us know because we're here to help. And that is all I have.